the last of a whole series of verses from Canto 3, Chapter 25, where Kapila Deva is teaching his mother, or instructing his mother. I'll just read the verse and the translation purport, and we'll discuss. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So it's 3:25:27. The glories of devotional service. Devayam Vikater Gunanam Jnanena Vairagya Vrijimritena Yogena Maya Arpitaya Cha Bhaktya Mam Pratyag Atmanam Ivar. So, Ihavarudha. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life. For I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is an interesting statement because he's talking to his mother. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When one engages in devotional service to the Lord in the 9 different kinds of bhakti yoga, as enunciated in authoritative scriptures, such as hearing Shravanam, chanting Kirtanam, remembering, offering worship, praying and offering personal service. That's 6, there's 9. Either in one of them, or 2, or 3, or all of them, he naturally has no opportunity to engage in the service of the 3 modes of material nature. Unless one has good engagements in spiritual service, it is not possible to get out of the attachment to material service. Therefore, those who are not devotees are interested in so-called humanitarian or philanthropic work, such as opening a hospital or charitable institution. These are undoubtedly good works in the sense that they are pious activities, and the result is that the performer may get some opportunities for sense gratification, either in this life or in the next. Devotional service, however, is beyond the boundary of sense gratification. It is completely spiritual activity. When one engages in the spiritual activities of devotional service, naturally, he does not get any opportunity to engage in sense gratificatory activities. Krishna conscious activities are performed not blindly, but with perfect understanding of knowledge and renunciation. This kind of yoga practice, in which the mind is always fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotion, results in liberation in this very life. That person who performs such acts gets in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya. Therefore, approve the process of hearing from realized devotees about the pastimes of the Lord. It does not matter to what category of this world the audience belongs. If one meekly and submissively hears about the activities of the Lord from a realized soul, he will be able to conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is unconquerable. by any other process, hearing or associating with devotees is the most important function for self-realization. End of purport. That's the end of the section. I think it's a good idea to go back a bit and just present the context. How far back to go? After the first manifestation, after Brahma appears from the lotus flower generated from the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu, he does what he does to get self-realization, and he gets instruction from Vishnu to build the universe. He has the impetus, and he gets the direct instruction to do it. So he builds the universe. And there's details about how that happens. And then he has to fill up the universe that he just created. So, what to do? It's something that's a very interesting detail I like. Within each universe, when Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters, he takes one universe's worth of living entities with him, within him. And when he manifests Lord Brahma on the stem of his lotus, he then, Lord Vishnu, passes on the living entities to Lord Brahma, who they're within the body of Lord Brahma. And it's for this reason that Brahma could then manifest living entities right from his body without any help. So first, for Kumars, they say no thanks, Dad. He becomes angry, Lord Shiva appears, then things happen with Lord Shiva, and he tells the 11 Rudras, you go to some place, I'll tell you when it's time to destroy the universe, not now. And then he manifests some sages. One of those sages is Kardama, direct son of Lord Brahma. And when Kardama is requested, please help fill up the universe with living entities, and that means living entities of different species. So it's yes, sir, and he goes off to the forest to do his Satya Yoga process of Dhyan Yoga. At the same time, it's Dhyan Yoga, but he's also filled with devotion. That is to say, real meditation isn't just meditation, it's meditation with an objective or purpose behind it, embedded within the meditation. It's meditation on the personality of Godhead. Kardama is a devotee, not just a meditator, and he has a desire on behalf of the Supreme Lord to have as his son the Supreme Lord. And his meditation upon the Supreme Lord becomes so profound that Lord Vishnu appears, standing on the back of Garuda, and says, Haribol, I know what your desire is. And the answer is yes. And you pleased me very much. But for you to have offspring, including me, you're going to need a wife, and no worries, because in 2 days, Swayambhuva Manu is going to come with his daughter, Devahuti, making a marriage proposal, and all you have to do is say yes. Pretty easy. And sure enough, 2 days later, Swayambhuva Manu comes into the forest. Now why does he come into the forest? Because in his royal palace, sages would visit, and one of them was Narada. Narada said, "Let me tell you the good news about Kardama Muni, and he's a good person for you to marry." So she develops this urge and desire to marry Kardama Muni, Hare Krishna. And so that's what happened. And she tells her father, "I'd like to marry Kardama Muni." Very well. He's a Brahmana of impeccable standing, and you're a Kshatriya young girl. Fine, that is a suitable marriage. Let's go find. So they find. And there he is, doing his dhyan yoga. And Swayambhuva Manu introduces himself and his daughter, saying, "My daughter would like to become your wife. Will you accept her?" And Kardama Muni says, "Yes, on one condition, that when there is a son old enough to look after your daughter or my future wife, then I'll, with your consent, pre-consent, I'll go back to the forest and continue my practices of meditation and Yuga Dharma." So he agrees, and they're married right there in the forest. And Swayambhuva Manu goes back. All this is the earlier section. 9 daughters are born first. Lord Brahma comes when the daughters are of marriageable age, and Devahuti is at that time pregnant with Kapila Dev, and Swayambhuva Manu is very grateful for his Kardamas doing the service he wanted. These 9 daughters can then be given in marriage to other sages so they can help produce offspring that's going to populate the universe. Not just with human beings, but all kinds of species. It's a very interesting procedure. And by the way, within Devahuti's womb is the form of the Lord. So please look after him when he's born. So the daughters are then given in marriage, and Kapila Dev is born. For a long time, they're continue with their little son, and eventually then Kardama Muni decides he wants to go to the forest and continue his meditation. So he does that, leaving. Oh, there's some details in between. That's okay. He was a mystic, in addition to being a yogi, a meditator. When it was time for children to be born, you were falling asleep?
That's some ant.
Huh?
There is some ant or something.
Ant, and the ant in his back.
Oh, really?
I think
The ant on his back, so I didn't want it to bite him. He must be sweet. That's why I was good.
You probably startled him more than the ant would have. Okay, back to the Bhagavatam. Yeah. Kardama understood the desire of Devahuti after tens of thousands of years of living in the forest and serving her husband. I know you desire to have a child, and so with his mystic power he created a vimana that could fly throughout the universe, and they went sightseeing the whole universe and came back, and the children were then born. And so he now, Kapila Dev, is left with his mother because Kardama went back to the forest. So that's how this chapter begins. She, the mother, just like the cover picture, the mother is sitting with her son, presenting question. The main question is, I'm too much attached. I've been with my husband for so long, and I'm really attached, and now he's gone. And I'm feeling the pain of separation because too much attachment. So, what to do when you're feeling attachment? And I know that you're here now, but you're not going to stay forever either. And then I'll be alone. So, what to do? Feelings of attachment and feeling lonely. What to do? So, the principal answer that starts this chapter 25 is sadhu sangha. Sadhu sangha, association with sadhus, and that's the means. And he explains a number of things, and he comes back to this section that we're reading from. And in this section, it's a very nice section. It's a celebrated section. I learned this from Dravida Prabhu's. You know Dravida from LA?
No.
He was a BBT editor.
Maybe, I might have met him when I was young.
Okay.
I was like 6 when I left, 6 years old.
All right.
I don't remember a lot of...
He was there. He's been
My
doing
mother
it.
worked at the BBT, so she probably knows him very well.
Okay.
She was a
Dravida.
printer.
Dravida.
The name...
Dravida. So, from Dravida I learned that these 8 verses are sadhu sangastika. One time, for several years, I invited him to come for a duet seminar. And one of the parts that he did is he poeticized these verses and sang them and then explained them. No, he's a very entertaining personality.
Yeah.
Very entertaining. So, Sadhu Sangastika says, and he restates the principle. The way to become relieved from attachment is through association of those who are elevated sadhus. And then the next he says, here's the characteristics of a sadhu. And then next he says, here's what you do when you're with a sadhu, the activities that you do with a sadhu. And then next is, here's the consequences. And then he describes the steps or stages of elevation of bhakti to higher and higher stages of bhakti through sadhu sangha. And then comes this verse, which addresses her question. That is, affinity for material, that's material attachment, which she said she was wishing to become free from. So that's the context. And I'll read the verse again. So, by explaining the process of devotional service as the consequence, devotional service is the consequence of sadhu sangha, and then when that devotional service is engaged in, one will transcend the modes of material nature. By not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge and renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association. So he's answering the question that's, my husband's gone, you're going to be gone. And he's explaining, although I'm gone, I will be gone. You will have my association by this method. Physical presence, maybe no. But spiritual association, yes. So there's several elements in Prabhupada's purport. One of them, an obviously standard point, is by the mind fixed upon the Supreme. That's the goal, or that's one of the symptoms of mature yoga practice. Madgatena antaratmana. You know the verse from Bhagavad Gita? The
You come and listen there.
come on in. Come on in. The final verse of chapter 6. Yoginam api sarvesham. You know the verse? Madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samayukta tamomataha. That verse, the Yukta Uttama, the topmost system of yoga, is explained. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is step by step taking Arjuna through the yoga system without defining what those steps are. Then he comes to the stage of chapter 6 where he's describing the process of meditation, Dhyan Yoga, chapter 6. And then he concludes by telling Arjuna, by all means, Arjuna, become a yogi. And Arjuna is saying, oh, controlling the mind, difficult. And Krishna is giving the solution. Yes, difficult. But it's possible. How? Constant practice and detachment. Constant practice and detachment. It's Patanjali Yoga. Constant practice and detachment. Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamino. It's constant practice leads to attachment, and attachment leads to material detachment. Attachment to spirit leads to material detachment, which is what's being said. So the same principle in the summary verse as found in Bhagavad Gita and so many other places. You can't have the mind fixed on Krishna if you're materially attached. And if you practice yoga combined with knowledge, this is what's the Sanskrit here, knowledge in renunciation, then attachment becomes, as that attachment grows, it doesn't have to, but as attachment to Krishna, or the spiritual reality, as attachment to spiritual reality grows and grows, then detachment follows. Detachment follows attachment. Material detachment follows spiritual attachment naturally. And when that knowledge and detachment become matured, mind in that condition is fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he's concluding, when that happens, one gets my association directly, even in this lifetime. So Devahuti, my dear mother, you want to know how to overcome your too much affinity for matter problem and its attachment because of that? Sadhu Sangha. And then steps again. Hearing from the sadhu, and then living a lifestyle of based upon what he hears from the sadhu. You have to become a sadhu, live the lifestyle according to the teachings of sadhu. And what does the sadhu teach? It teaches about the pastimes and qualities and etc., the tattva of Krishna. Naturally. And then the mind will go there instead of the modes of nature. At least the potency is there in practice with the knowledge of detachment, exactly what's being said here. Then I want to go there. I don't want to stay here. I want to stay, because she's already said I don't want to stay in this attached position. So she's a good candidate for bhakti. Now, she's speaking as if she's an attached person. She's not. But she's speaking as if she is. Otherwise, how is it possible that she could be the mother of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? She doesn't have material attachment. She has spiritual attachment. And even attachment to her husband, who's a pure devotee, who's the father of the Personality of Godhead. That's a spiritual attachment. It's a little bit, it's not the same, but it's a little bit like Kunti's prayers. Canto 1, Chapter 8, where Kunti is praying to Krishna, please take away my attachment for my sons and for my father's family. Now, they're pure devotees. So it's remove the material portion of that attachment is the essence of what she's saying. As if for Kunti there's a material. There's no material. Or for Devahuti there's no material attachment. But she's speaking as if there was, so we can understand the principle. Even if one becomes an elevated person, is there a possibility for some portion of one's attachment to be still on the material side? Yes. So how to come to the even a trace of the material? By sadhu sangha and by mercy. By sadhu sangha comes devotional service, and through devotional service comes a stronger appeal, as Devahuti or Kunti or elevated souls, appeal for mercy. And does that ever stop? No. Does it grow? Yes. On the platform of perfection? Yes. It's the nature of the elevated person. They have feelings of humility. Arising from those feelings, or along with those feelings of humility, comes the urge, increasing urge for descending mercy. That's a sign of spiritual elevation. Consistent. So this is a summary of this Sadhu Sangastika section. Emphasis Prabhupada is making repeated. Doesn't matter prior qualification or apparent disqualification on the material side. Doesn't matter one's guna and karma. It doesn't matter one's birth. It doesn't matter. That is to say, devotional service is so powerful, it can make even wet wood dry quickly. That's what Prabhupada did. Came to the West and interacted with people who were in the wet wood category. But by his intensity of devotion, then the wet wood became dry wood, became ignited by the fire of devotion. And that's the sadhu. Now, he wasn't an ordinary sadhu. He was a especially empowered sadhu. But the sadhu principle says, doesn't matter someone's background. In fact, the very nature of sadhu is compassion. And so the concern of a compassionate sadhu is there are people who are struggling in this world unnecessarily. And in that struggle, they're suffering and suffering and suffering. What to do? So this is Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers. I'm just hearing it this morning. A morning walk conversation with Prabhupada in Los Angeles in 1973. He was saying the nature of sadhu is that for themselves they have no problem, but their unhappiness is the misery that others are undergoing unnecessarily and so foolishly that They accept the misery that they're going through as something nice. He gives the example of a worm in stool. It's not nice, being a worm in stool. But take the worm out of stool, what's he going to do? He'll wiggle his way back into the pile of stool. Because that's nice. It's warm. He likes. Etc. So many nice examples. Indra becoming a pig and trying to rescue him. No, I have so much responsibility here. Having a nice time being a pig. King of heaven. So attachment tells one that the situation that's uninviting is okay. Or something. You have to take the bad with the good, and it's okay. It's okay. Such a mindset shuts down the possibility of asking, why do I have to get old and die? Well, that's just the way it is, my dear friend. It's just the way it is. But why is it the way it is? Does it have to be the way that it is? Yeah, it has to be the way it is. But the inquisitive person doesn't want the unwanted part. So, is there a way to get free from the unwanted part? Yes. So then one needs teachings and a teacher and a process, and then it's possible. Make the solution, human form of life is meant for making a solution to the problems of life. Is it possible? Yes. The Vedas are providing. The Vedas are providing ways to get an upgrade in to the heavenly planets, etc., etc. That's what's being said here. You know, that devotional service is beyond pious activities. The fruits of pious activities is heavenly pleasures, or increased enjoyment, if not heavenly pleasures, increased facility for enjoyment through sense objects because of piety. So pious people have that perk, have that benefit. However, that benefit can be an inhibitor to going further. You know, what's beyond the temporary. So it doesn't matter. That's the point that's being made in the purport. The audience can be whatever the audience is. The method of sadhu sangha works regardless of the audience. Now, there may be more swift progress or slow progress. If a spark from a fire falls on dry leaves, it may ignite more quickly than a spark falling on wet leaves or wet grass. But the spark will work regardless. And especially if the spark is more than a spark, if it's a flame or a big blaze. So that's sadhu sangha. So that's this section. It's going to carry on. Devahuti is going to start asking some more questions. Kapila Deva is going to give more elaborate answers or responses to her questions. It's a really nice section. Glories of devotional service. Okay, any discussion or your thoughts on the verse, the message?
I like the spark.
Huh?
I like the spark falling on the dry leaves.
You like? You like the metaphor?
Yeah, I like the metaphor. I do. Yeah, it makes sense.
Now here's just to take that topic and put it in context. You've heard of the book Madhurya Kadambini? Madhurya, it's sweetness. It's a book by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur where he's taking You got a busy phone. He's taking the 9 stages of bhakti, not the 9 processes, that's in this purport, 9 stages of bhakti, from adau shraddha up to prema, and the other 7 in between, and explaining them. So in one section, he's describing as bhakti grows from sadhu sangha, so there's preliminary, that's the dry leaf, preliminary faith, and then sadhu sangha, and then comes bhajana kriya. So those are the first 3. Bhajana kriya is the activities of bhakti, sadhana bhakti, 3rd stage. There's obstacles that one starts to encounter. Not that they weren't there before, but you start to meet them. Stuff that's inside, unwanted stuff inside that's inhibiting bhakti. And he writes, there are 4 categories of inhibitors. And one is the inhibitions, the inhibitors that come from previous sins. That's pretty obvious. That's it helps. That's the wet leaf or wet grass. But bhakti is so powerful that it can free one from all reactions of previous sins. Then he says 2 more that are a little puzzling, at least initially, and that is the obstacles that arise from the fruits of past piety. The obstacles that arise from the fruits of past piety is the fruits of piety, and one's busy being the enjoyer of the fruits of piety, so much so that bhakti gets inhibited because one's attention is on enjoying the fruits of past piety. And then, so bhakti has to be strong. Be cautious about the enjoyer mood. Instead, take the service to Krishna mood. That's bhakti. Then there's a 3rd, and that's the benefits that are arising from bhakti nicely performed. That can be an inhibitor. How? Supposing you do bhakti nicely, something happens. What happens? You may get some distinction, adoration, fame, or a title, or some glorification. Very nice. So becoming the enjoyer of the fruits of nicely performed bhakti can be an inhibitor to go further on the path of bhakti. And then the 4th category is offense. That's a offense results in anarthas in the heart. And things that are in the heart that have arisen from anarthas, they're more difficult. Or offenses are more difficult. Anyway, just on the topic of the dry leaves, there can certainly be a problem if the consciousness behind the fruits of piety is, I want to be the enjoyer of these fruits. And it's kind of natural. Here comes some nice fruits of piety. Good education, wealth, beauty, strength, fame, renunciation, including renunciation. And one wants to be an enjoyer of those opulences that come from piety. That can be a problem. The real problem is not the fruits of piety. The problem is the consciousness behind it. And if the consciousness behind it moves from being the enjoyer of to being the servant of Krishna, then those fruits can be used in service. That's nice. And then when no fruits of when prosperity crashes, then what? Because sometimes that happens, even for pious people. There's a downswing of the fruits of piety. And good fortune becomes misfortune. It happens. Then what? Where's one's shelter? So if one's shelter is in the mood of service, then you're going to be okay. And if your shelter is the opulences then you're not going to be okay. So the real solution is shelter in the mood of service that becomes awakened through sadhu sangha. Anything else?
Sounds like you just need to be leery of too much comfort, too much pride.
Well, the real thing is more sadhu sangha, please.
More service.
because then then I can be protected.
Mm-hmm.
I can be protected because the sadhu is going to encourage bhakti. And more bhakti, that's protection. Bhakti is the protection, and the awakening and reviving and strengthening of bhakti is through sadhu sangha. And that means, hearing and chanting, etc., etc. All of those preliminaries are involved in the sadhu sangha part. I was thinking about our gathering yesterday evening. It was really nice. I mean, besides just speaking about Bhagavad Gita, at the end, the kirtan. And I don't know, most of the people that were in the room with us, they're accustomed to kirtan. But that being accustomed to kirtan is what happens from kirtan. And then, just looking around the room, devotees were with their eyes closed, and they were just like immersed in, leaving behind the cares and woes and the ups and the downs and the good and the bad, just getting absorbed in. When there's spiritual attachment, then the other fades. It doesn't go away, but the giving it importance as if its reality fades. That's the fruit of sadhu sangha and bhajana kriya. And coming up in a few verses, Kapila Dev is going to say, this bhakti process is so fantastic that the subtle body is dissolved. The mind that thinks good and bad, and happiness and distress, and pleasure and pain, and duality, it dissolves. Bhakti is very powerful. What do you think, Mataji? Is bhakti powerful?
I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, bhakti definitely is very powerful.
Okay.
Most powerful.
Most powerful.
Yeah.